Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today, which is Microsoft Teams for Legal, how to best design teams and channels. And we're here for Prosperoware. I'd like to introduce Keith Lippman, who is CEO and co-founder of Prosperoware. And we'll also have coming on to do some demonstrations, Sarah Tanswell, who is a solution consultant and customer success manager at Prosperoware. Hi guys.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Sarah's going to be off screen because her Wi-Fi can handle the video.
That didn't sound enthusiastic. We'll just let everyone filter in a little bit. I've learned with these webinars that it takes a minute for everyone to come in. So just a little bit of housekeeping while we're gaining a few more people. Just to say thanks to Prosperoware for joining us to talk about Teams. It's obviously a really hot topic, and I don't know any law firm that's not talking about what they do, how they manage it, how they provision it, whether they use it for internal or external. And we're going to come on to talk about all of these topics. In terms of just a bit of housekeeping, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see so many of you already. And the idea is that this is going to be really interactive. So we've got Keith, and I'll be asking Keith lots of questions. We've got Sarah who's going to be doing some demonstrations, which is certainly how I learn best. But the idea is that this is your webinar, right? So for those of you watching it live, if you can ask as many questions, we've got questions already that have come in as part of the registration process. So we'll be putting those up in the chat. Everyone knows how Zoom works. I don't need to do any housekeeping about that. You just put your questions in the chat and we will deal with them as they come up. We've got some help with identifying any questions that I miss, but I'm sure Keith will be sharp looking up questions. So for those of you who aren't aware, Prosperoware CAM is an enterprise privacy management platform for content systems, including Microsoft Teams and SharePoint Online. And it's fair to say you've been quite busy working with Teams. Hey, Keith?
Yeah, I was to say, basically I describe it. I think we kicked off Teams March of 2020, the beginning of COVID fun, as I think I'll now term it. And it's interesting to watch over the last 15 months or so, as firms have really started to, we've got a whole set of leading firms who are really diving into Teams right away. There's a whole bunch of lessons learned, a lot of things that we, need people to really understand, because it's not the same as running an on-premises system. And that's been the fascinating piece. And at the same time, Microsoft has been enhancing it tremendously over those 15 months. So it's a very different product than it was literally when we started this and when we first started doing webinars and talking about to the market.
Yeah, I was going to make that observation. It's fascinating the amount of investment that's gone into Teams from Microsoft, and also the strategic priority so thanks to remote working firms that didn't have Teams on their list of priority, the ones that I've spoken to, it was elevated immediately to top of the list, right? So, and it's interesting to talk to you about how you've seen that transition over the past year, because it was very quick, but then obviously there's been a big evolution. Thank you to everyone saying hi. Maybe we should just have a quick look. So, because I want everyone to feel like that this is an interactive webinar. As I said, I'm repeating myself because I'm old. Hi Sophie from Osborne Clark. Hi Mitch Kowalski, who I know very well in Toronto. Hi Mitch. And hi Nigel. Amazing. This is a Teams meeting. Okay. You've got a good point. Trouble is, at the moment, Teams is still not quite there when it comes to webinars, but it's getting there. So do you think, Keith, we're gonna come on to talk about structuring teams and channels with your audience in mind. I don't know what the level is of, I think everyone is familiar. So obviously team, do you want to just briefly set out the teams and channels quickly? So
let's take a step back, because one of the things that we do, one of the things that we've really run into recently is a lot of firms have been, people make phone calls and say, do you use Teams? And then you'll call and the lawyer will say, sure, we use Teams. And all they're using it for is meetings. Yeah. So one of the things that we need to be clear is when we talk about Teams, we're really focused not just on we're not really focused on the meeting piece, but we're focusing on this ability to create what is called a team. And then under a team is a channel, and a channel is where you can chat and you can put files and integrate lots of systems together to do some interesting things. And that's what we're going to talk about. And we call that team and channels. It's confusing because Microsoft then called the product Teams. So it's kind of a really confusing nomenclature. So that's why I'm now saying teams and team and channel.
So I'm sure
and that'll be a more clear way.
I'm sure everyone knows, but so Teams is obviously your collection of people, content, tools for different projects. And then underneath that, you've got, I think this is probably way too basic, and we're definitely going to be getting less basic. But just to be clear when we're talking about that, so channels are obviously the dedicated section within the team. And Keith's going to be talking us through how to avoid the madness right from the outset, because one of the things that I think people are learning is that unless you
Uh-oh.
I
think we lost Caroline for a moment.
Can you?
Are you back? You froze for a few minutes.
I nearly had a heart attack.
I nearly had a heart attack.
My screen just went blank. Everything is fine. Where were we?
Okay, so we're talking about teams and channels and the basics of it.
Yeah, fine. So we're going to look at the different ways so let's start off. You're going to talk about the different ways that firms, because you're speaking to a lot of firms and they're taking very different approaches to the way that they interact or they use Teams. So can you talk us through that?
Let's talk about it. So what we're seeing in our initial deployments is really a couple different models. We have one firm who basically we've deployed Teams where there is creating a team and channel or channels for every single solitary matter that they open. Yeah. And they are basically using it as what I would call lawyer desktop, right? This is the place I'm going to do, and all of my work is there. That's kind of model one that we've seen. Model two, and that's the least typical we've seen. I think it's actually going to be in 18 months, the most typical, but today it's the least typical. The next one, which we see a lot, is firms are really thinking about this as a tool for internal collaboration, or I call it intranet collaboration, but internal. How do I collaborate around a matter to get things done? And we've seen a range of different functionality they've put there. And many of them are doing it internally as just getting used to the product with a plan to go external. And then we have another set of clients who are, the reason they're implementing Teams is to support their external collaboration day one, to replace an existing investment in some other system, because basically Teams is a lot cheaper in some ways, but also the clients in essence use Teams.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it makes so much sense from that level, and also from the point of view that everyone's so invested in Microsoft, right? So and does it, in terms of who's doing what, like, can you identify, is there a reason why, like, a type of firm? Is it to do with their level of technical ability, or is it to do with the type of work? Can you rationalize why they're taking such different approaches?
I think you can rationalize it really in a very, very simple way. It depends on what somebody had a vision, right? I think the rationalization is it depends on what the problem in front of each one of them is. Some firms have wanted to have, there's this idea of the lawyer desktop has been, I think I worked on my first lawyer desktop project was 1999 with Plumtree software, right? So we've all been chasing this vision of, can we put it in one place? And in fact, then the next flavor of it for the last, I don't know, for about the next 10 to 15 years was we'll put everything in Outlook until we all made Outlook not really work very well. Yeah. And in some ways, Teams, unlike Outlook, is designed to handle this problem. So that's one set. Yeah. The other set on the extranet is, I think the clients are pulling people in. I think the clients are saying, we use Teams. Do you use Teams? Can we agree to use the same platform? Because now I don't have to learn a new piece of technology. That drives the external. And then on the internal collaboration, it's not just Teams. It's really the idea of Planner and List and the about 1,000 applications that you can integrate and drop into Teams already to build this very collaborative experience for people, so they can work differently, right? And that is what people are not ready to say, I'm ready to do that for every matter. They're just simply saying, let's do this for the ones I want. So in other words, I was gonna say, so in other words, what we see with some clients, the one who are creating it all the time, they give no choice. Once you open a matter, it opens. Most everybody else has either added a little checkbox in new business intake, or we give them a workflow forms for them to fill out, pick what template they want, and manage access.
Yeah.
Well, but one of the things that we have come through, which is the same best practice we've recommended in the DMS world for a long time, is that teams is that end users shouldn't own teams. That's one of the philosophies that we've always brought. We actually said the same thing, that in the iManage and the documents world, end users shouldn't own the workspace or the folders. You know, and that same idea applies.
Why don't we get to, because there's some really cool questions coming in, but what I think we'll do, I think if we can get Sarah to do a quick demo, and then everyone keep your questions coming, because I'm not ignoring them. We're going to do a quick demo, and then we can come back to these questions, and then Keith can answer. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind doing the first demo, and then we'll get back to it. And then while Sarah's demoing, if you've got any questions.
I'm reading questions right now, so.
Yeah, go. Okay, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind doing the sort of first demo in terms of what we've just been talking about, that would be great.
Yeah, certainly, not a problem. Hopefully everybody should be able to see my screen. So I think that the first thing that we've just touched on is the ability, but also having that naming convention. So again, Keith, Caroline, give me a shout if there's anything particular you want me to show. But essentially here I've got set up various matters. Keith just touched on what is, as he says, quite an unusual scenario, but we expect very much to be a very usual scenario moving forward, is that for every matter that's being created, there is a team. And in this particular setup, we've got a general channel where only the owners can post. So this is going to be really your notifications. So for example, Wendy being the owner and the partner here is giving her information, setting meetings. But if I was to jump in as another lawyer, so let's say Ryan in this case, I can only comment. I can't start making any posts myself. So again, you're allowing the right people to have the right controls. I can also set up private channels as well. So although this isn't, go on, sorry, Keith.
I was going to say, Sarah, we should really explain private channels, because private channels are really, have finally matured enough. So really private channels have been maturing over the last 6 months. And really, it's a subset of people, and it has an ability to have its own security and other things that it did not have. So it's matured a lot technically. And you can see in this example where we've got billing and partners. So the idea here is saying that the partners can work with the billers, or the partners only can have a place where they can chat themselves. And where matter is, everybody can kind of access it, or that could be labeled legal team. All of these ideas, I want to say, these are starters. We've got a white paper on this. The whole idea of some of this information is so that you guys start thinking about the issues, and you don't have to give the lawyers a blank page. Go ahead, Sarah.
No problem. And then obviously we've got other channels as well. So channels being, we always have general when we create a team, that's standard, but as we just saw, we can actually apply controls. So for example, if I go in to manage this channel, I've set it that only the owners can post messages. I've got other options as well around what they can post in terms of memes and GIFs and et cetera. But for my books and my law team, this is where they will do their work. This is where they're going to start collaborating. And it's not just about chat and about calls, which is what the majority of law firms are currently just using Teams for. It's actually starting to share content, really nice features such as co-authoring. So for example, Wendy has said, look, let's jump on a call, let's co-author this document. And so they can jump into the document together. So for example, if I jump into the document as Ryan as well, then we'll be able to see what changes he's making on this document in live time. So we can set up a call, we can start editing this document together, and then we're going to achieve what we need to achieve quicker as well. Same when it comes to sharing information as well via the chat. We're able to do that at the same time, doing things such as here the discovery interview has been completed. All Wendy needs to do when Ryan pops her a chat is he can click through and it takes her through to the applicable events tasks. And I think we're going to come on to some of these additional Microsoft applications a little bit later in the webinar. But the point being is that the team collectively can really collaborate together. We're no longer relying purely on emails. We're now having a central place where the lawyer can work like Keith indicated, where everything can be done together. And then as we'll see later on, we can then start using other applications within Microsoft to really enhance that collaboration. Give Caroline, anything else you'd like me to show at this stage?
No.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. So, no, I'm going to go back to the questions. So if I do not get your question, repost it, because maybe I've lost it. So I like the fact that everyone was talking about why we're in Teams in Zoom and not Teams. That's very funny. Thank you. So I don't know if you want to come back to this one. Thank you, William Wellwell, for saying I'm setting up Teams as the main project management tool. I mean, we are going to come on to Planner, etc. But anyway, we can address these as we go. As the main project management tool for matters we're involved with, as opposed to a traditional case management system. So interested in Keith's model 1. Do you want to come back to this or deal with it now?
No, let's do with it now. I mean, I think one of the things and Sarah's got it up as an example. I mean, if we're saying we're going to handle it, what we've seen, and Sarah can show them what we've done, is we're working with firms right now where it literally is we're predefining, we templatize and give you the ability to templatize the tasks, which is what the project management piece is, right? You can do the task management, and Planner is, I mean, while you could do training on it, Planner is pretty easy. Right. So you can easily add the planner. You can also, and we'll show you, is you can also build checklists and lists. And so really you can, and we've even can do tabs and predefine things in OneNote. So you can give that entire experience. So this is where we think that it becomes Lawyer Desktop, right? This is because now we finally can say that. And I think that's really, we've all been talking in that, with Delta variant now running, especially everywhere where people are slowing down the return to work, we have to say that hybrid work is here to stay. And this type of technology, this type of approach really will enable people on the long term to collaborate more effectively, sometimes use digital transformation, but that's really going to be critical. And how do you template and get all that together and adjust is really, really important.
And if William, post in the chat, and if you're using Planner, unless it's confidential, that'd be interesting to know. So Alex Isaacs, forgive me if I read your name. He's just as a panelist, but anyway.
Oh, he's going quickly. How do you create a client? He's using buckets very simply. Okay.
Alexa, so how do you get around Metaphiles and a single source of truth? Do you link this into the DMS?
Oh, okay. So let's talk about what we're seeing. Okay, so we have, I would say we're on the version 4. I'll call it version 4 of integrating DMS and Teams okay. One of the things to be clear. Hey, Sarah, I don't know if you can quickly navigate Teams. If you go to the Files tab, is SharePoint, right? So if you go into the Teams tab and then you click on Open in SharePoint, you're really just simply storing data in SharePoint. You don't have as much flexibility in the display and other things, but you're putting your documents in SharePoint, right? And what happens is that this is an interconnected workspace to SharePoint. These are interconnected. This SharePoint site is connected to that. And if you create a private channel, you get another SharePoint site. So that's the first thing to establish. What we see with the DMS versus Teams file, we've seen 3 critical use cases come up, right? Use case 1 is, and this one really comes up with, is in the extranet scenario, where I basically want to, I get certain sets of documents and I'm going to just automatically, I put them in the DMS and I publish them out to Teams through the Files tab so that I can give them access to my client. That is the first simple use case that you need to support in order to do things. The more common use case, which I'm starting to see, which is I call the work anywhere use case. So what work anywhere says is the firm is starting to go, we don't care, pick whatever file, whatever tool you want, put in Teams, put in DMS, we'll just sync them together using two-way sync, so that all the data ends up in the DMS and we can have it all there and everybody can use it, but we don't care which system you use. Now, one caution with that is Teams and the DMS are very different versioning. So that's something that to really understand. And then the third use case we see is kind of, I call DMS as the factory floor. And what that is the idea that, and we see this, in the easy example is corporate legal, right? Or with a client. Let's say I've got a contract. I am using my DMS as the factory floor. I'm going to edit and create the document, use the usual processes I want to do. I then check it out for the client or for other internal people to actually now do real-time collaboration on it, make all those changes, then check back in and return it back to the DMS. Those are really the three core use cases that we are really seeing in the market today.
Interesting, really interesting. So in your opinion, this is interesting. So, and this is to everyone. So Alain Lapierre, thank you. In your opinion, is it better for users to learn to use Teams on their own, or would you recommend that users be trained on Teams, Planner, etc.?
I mean, you need to provide them some navigation. I actually do this way. I think you need to train the process. The technology isn't that hard.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I think more the issue, which is define how you want people to use Teams, is the training that's required. How do you want to use the general channel? How will billers interact? Is there a place for partners only? What are the rules of engagement that you need to think about? And what are the limitations, right? Because like all systems, there are rules that you just can't violate in Teams along the way. And that, I think, is really what needs to be trained.
Yeah.
The technology itself is not particularly hard, but obviously there's always somebody who needs training.
So, I mean, we're going to probably hopefully have time to come and to talk about the naming conventions, etc. And I think that's stuff that, you can't just start making that stuff up. And it's interesting that Sophie Thompson said at the beginning, before the questions started coming fast and furious, that her objective was to hear how Teams can be used in a way that isn't completely overwhelming and that creates a ton of silos. And this is the issue, isn't it? Right? Everyone needs to have, there needs to be a common process understanding rules around it, right? Like in order to prevent the Wild West.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and this is one of the things, even from the name. I mean, so first, this is a story about, I'll give you the story, which is the really awful tale, this came from let's call it a global real estate firm that we've been talking to. They have 60,000 users. They turned on Teams and they let everybody create a team themselves. They basically said they reached just south of 100,000 teams created. Remember, today you only got 500,000 teams in a tenant. They had to turn off end user creation. So no matter what, day one, if you're ready to turn on Teams and channels, you need some process to control who can create these things, whether you use a product like ours or you build something yourself. But the point being is that you have to have control of what is going to happen and who's going to create it. But also critically, even on naming, if you right click on the team, there's no place to put client matter or other things. And nor is there enough room to really put all the name, to put a really big name. So look, and we've given some examples here where it's like the real estate you get to name the team. And Sarah, why don't you hit, what's the total count? You can see you quickly run out of real estate along the way.
Did you have any, what we'll do, I think I really want to focus on the questions, but do you want to talk about like any top tips on naming conventions, or is that something I think the white paper?
I think it's in the way, but I think the top tips on what naming convention is, I think is really typified right there. See how his example, we put internal, external. So this is an example where a firm is using both internal and external, two different teams for collaboration, versus some firms use one team for both internal and external collaboration. The thing to keep in mind is you don't have a lot of room, right? So you need to try to get at least some number there so that you're clear, because a lot of client names look the same, a lot of matter names look the same. So you need to at least get some number there. And really look at using short names versus long names. The other thing, which is also critical, is to actually collect. And Sarah, can you drop into the CAM app where you can get a much more expansive, the Teams CAM app?
Yeah, let me just jump on to another one. I think I need to go through the login process otherwise on this one.
Okay. So what's critical about it is really that you need to have some place that people can find things, because they will quickly get overwhelmed, right? You don't want to be, one of the struggles with Teams is to find the right team. So that's one of the things that you fundamentally need to kind of design around and understand, because otherwise people will really be in trouble.
We are going to talk about governance. So question, I don't know if this is public, but anyway, so will you be addressing governance where the service of record is a DMS that's not SharePoint or OneDrive? Yeah, we will. So should we do that now? So
we can do that now.
We've got, keep your questions coming. We're going to get through them, but if we will start trying to tick off some of the scheduled topics, like so governance. So So obviously this is one of those areas where there's been a massive change during the year, and where Microsoft's been focusing a lot of its billions. Talk about a few of the issues, if Keith, if you wouldn't mind, talk about some of the basic issues and how that's been transformed.
I mean, I think that some of the basic issues on the governance side is the first element of governance, control who can create it. Mm-hmm. You know, Sarah, why don't as I talk, if you can hit on the app real fast. The point is you need to get client matter. You need to understand for legal work where it is, because my view is, at least if you understand client matter, you can, everyone can see in essence what is going on, and at least you know this is the data for this matter, right? So even if the DMS is the system of record, you then at least can identify all the data and export it and deal with it, and and tools are arriving, or the tools to bring it all together and arrive it. We can do a lot of that. So here it is. Here's everything in one place. I can report and export all of that data. So you can do your governance. The difference is where the work needs to happen around the 365 world, outside of using the core retention labels and other things, is really making it matter centric or process centric. So we can tag it at hey, we know this project has got this, and then basically update along the way.
Do you want to talk about, so obviously during the past year, iManage and NetDocuments have both come out with sort of solutions around the space, but am I right in saying that they don't avoid the need for provisioning, or am I wrong?
No, so basically, I mean, we're gonna make Sarah jump again, but what iManage and NetDocuments are both doing is giving you an ability in their apps to access their content. The problem is when you provision it, unless the end user is going to create that link themselves, they've got to manually do that work. So you still need a provisioning engine that'll come up and saying, we're creating a matter, we're creating a team and channel for this matter, and we're going to now relate that together. That is critical functionality that everybody needs. You can't do that out of the box with templates. You would need to do that with code. You have to either code a pretty big project, right? Because what you have to do is you have to basically get what is called, basically the ID of the workspace in iManage or NetDocuments, relate that together and pass that in, or just buy a product that does it already.
Sarah, do you want to share? Have you shown the iManage tab in Teams?
No, I can certainly do so. So for example, so I've got my Matter and I've got my iManage workspace, and that's going to allow my lawyers, again, you can obviously make this channel private if you wanted to. They need a login to get into the workspace, so you've got the ability for double security there. But here I am in the corresponding iManage workspace, so I can see the documents. I can work in iManage at this point. I can download the documents. I can take action on the documents. It just means that I'm not having to open yet another tab somewhere else in order to work on this. I've got my one-stop shop where I can work on everything together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, fine. So, and then
I see a question that I think kind of comes into this, which is some people are asking, are people templatizing for each matter type? That's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing people create, at least, a merger and acquisition template, a disputes template. They're creating, just like they did the document management system, they're creating all those templates, but those templates are much more complex because of all the different data types. So in other words, planner, list, OneNote, the folder structure, than they were ever in the document management system.
Yeah.
And,
sorry, okay.
And then you've got to relate that all together. That's why it's a lot more complex project along, and then defining naming standards, just like we define naming standards along the way for things.
These so Joe H, thank you for your question. Are there thoughts regarding data retention and integration with document management for auditing and protecting data?
Yeah, so that's the point. So a couple of different models that we've seen is, one is the two-way sync. There's also another model which says leave it all in, you can also say when the matter is over, bring all the data back from Teams, planner, channel, list, and bring that into your document management and snip it for long-term archiving, right? And that is something, and obviously we keep adding features around it, but it's really a critical thing because, as I said, there's a limit of about 500,000 teams in a tenant. So you need to not do that. And one of the confusions, by the way, is Microsoft has got a right click, says archive. all that does is actually hide the team.
That's my kind of archiving.
One of the questions somebody's asking is that iManage workspace from iManage. So Prosperoware is provisioning the iManage workspace, but what you're seeing is iManage's product, right? All we're doing is underneath creating a URL link or a link to the specific workspace for this matter along the way. I think there's another follow-up question, which is with the extranets. No, most people do not expose the iManage data, iManage directly on the extranet. They're then putting documents in the Files tab to expose on the extranet. So iManage still stays as the internal shop floor, and Teams is basically the showroom.
Yeah. Kashi, so I don't know if I can say the name, but so how do you create the teams manually, or do you have an automated way to monitor new clients' matters and new attorneys that work on a particular client and need access to such a team? Who admins the team if the process is manual?
So if it's manual, we have basically a set of set of workflow forms that somebody can fill out and basically create it, pick the template. Sarah, why don't you walk through one real fast?
Yeah, certainly. So in the CAM app here, as I'm here as Alexi, the lawyer, I can come through, depending on what workflows, how I've been given access to, you can determine that with CAM. I can then go forward and request or create my team. And again, with CAM, you can decide who can instantly create a team, automated, or who has to get approval to do so. And again, you can pick who those approvers are. And once it's approved, CAM will automatically create it. So let's say as Alexi, I'm working on my client Harkins and Manufacturing. It may be that the matter already exists or is linked into CAM, or I can create a brand new matter with a unique ID number if needs be. So let's just pick one that's already on the list. I can then pick my template. Again, with the workflows, you can actually say with this particular workflow, this is the only template you're getting, or if you wanted to, you can give the user the choice. And again, as the lawyer, I can start previewing that. So for example, I can see that this is going to include OneNote, folders, dashboards that takes me through to iManage, Planner, etc., etc. I can then start setting the security. I can add other metadata if I wanted to this, just for that person that was asking about analytics and auditing. But I can start adding the security. If it's going to have a private team, I can start naming my members. And I can start inviting the relevant people onto this team and choosing their role. So whether I want to select a couple of people here and maybe make them editors, i.e. members, or I can add other people as owners as well. So let's make Carol an admin, which is an owner. But I've also got the ability to add guests. And this is actually quite an interesting topic, because recently Microsoft put that if you have guest access with your Teams license, that when a team is created, you automatically have the ability to add guests. Well, that might not sit well, obviously, because some of these might be internal teams only, as we've just seen. So CAM actually gives you the ability through the workflow to turn this option off, so that if this is a particular workflow where it's just going to be an internal team, then I won't have the option to add a guest. But if I do, I can put the email address and name, and then when the team's created, it will be Teams that will send out the email inviting that particular guest. And then obviously you can add whatever questions in terms of collecting that information that you want to. You can see here, I can review the information and I can press next. And because I'm just, let's say, an associate, I need to get approval from maybe the practice partner or whoever it may be who has been setting CAM. And then as soon as that has been approved, then CAM will automatically create the team. I'll get a notification, an email. But again, if it might be that Alexi is the partner, you can say he doesn't need approval if he needs to create a team. So again, you've got that flexibility there.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Let's quickly wrap up, Keith.
There's lots more questions.
Right, Keith, we need to get on the case. Come on, right. Right, quickly. Orlando, thank you. Orlando Milford. How do you handle closing? No one's going to understand me. I'm too quick. How do you handle closing a team once a matter is finished? Where does the data go?
Where does it? Okay, so I'm saying when you close a case, you need to have some functionality from some third party, hint, that allows you to basically take the data and move it all into some other archive, which could be the DMS. By the way, there's a whole lot of questions here around why do you have about the Files tab in the DMS and what to do and how do you follow around this. And And I think one of the comments is, why do that? Well, so there's a couple of challenges. One, you can, and I think, Sarah, you can hit on turning off the files tab along the way. You can turn off, in essence, you can turn off the files tab completely for all users. There's only one problem. Planner's not going to work. And other applications that are dependent on SharePoint will not work. Mm-hmm. So there's a big challenge if you want to really turn off the files tab, but it's kind of difficult to do it. So in some ways, you've got to really talk to your end users. And since you can move the documents back into the DMS, does it really matter? I think that's the question you have to resolve in your head. That is definitely one big question around for people to think through. The other reason to expose the DMS is if you're thinking about this as Lawyer Desktop, having the DMS there is part of Lawyer Desktop, right? So it's kind of one comes to the other.
I think you've answered the next question as well from Rob Coven. He says, what are the main reasons for having a DMS next to Team SharePoint? I think you just answered that. Thanks for that question. Is Keith saying, so thanks Joshua Boudreau, that's my brilliant English accent there. Is Keith saying that some firms will create 2 teams for each one? They want one for internal and one external?
We're seeing both models. So we're seeing a model where the firm, so the question is let's talk about the business issue, right? The concern is, that you post to the wrong person. Right. In other words, you have an internal conversation that you want to post, and you want to keep internal, and you have something that you want to put to the client. So one strategy is to have two different teams for the same matter. Problem, of course, is your 500,000 just went to 250,000 by doing this style. If you do one, basically all the internal stuff, all the internal collaboration will become private channels. So the client will be on, in essence, the general channel or some other client collaboration channel where it'll all be public, and then all of the internal stuff that's happening for the inside the law firm will be on private channels. This is why naming is going to be important. So, like, for example, here we did at the team name, put internal up top. Another way to do is at the private channels to maybe put on the private channels, maybe put internal only or I only or something else to really indicate what to use them for.
Sorry. I was going to say, I'm brushing you, Keith. I was going to say, this brings us actually neatly to another question, which says, do you see standard or fixed templates being used for particular matter types with predefined naming conventions? And we've talked about this issue a lot.
You got to do it that way. Yeah, you really want this standardized. This is when I say you're training the process, you're not training the technology, right? And this is where I think even in many firms' document management deployments, where they mess up is they don't train the process, they just train the technology. This is about process enablement. This is basically doing process-driven collaboration, right? And also to think about it, hey, everyone, there's a lot of places in your organization that are horrible in process, which is, we work with a lot of firms who say, yeah, we're using Teams in IT and we're using Teams in HR and we're using Teams in everything, but we're not using it with the lawyers yet. But you should ask yourself, are you being process driven there? Or are you just creating the same one huge team that's just going to absorb every project you've done instead of thinking about every time we create a new project, let's create a new one. Every time we have a new effort or a new process, let's do that. Because otherwise you run into the same issues, which is you don't have information governance around your core, your firm's data. You only have some information governance around the client's data. So you really do need to think about that. And that's where many firms are falling down.
There's quite a lot of more iManage workspace questions. So I'm going to ask this one, and then I'm going to treat this as that's the iManage. So is the iManage is there a link? Is the iManage link to a particular workspace? It's not the integration. So apologies, I don't understand that question. Is the iManage a link to a particular workspace? It's not the integration yet, right?
In this demo, okay, so iManage is coming out with their own app. That app works with Cloud iManage.
Yeah.
In this, if you want to, and that app will be available shortly. We actually have it. We actually can provision it today. And I think it is publishing very shortly in the next, I think it actually goes in the App Store. I just had a conversation, I think this week or next week on their side. And we can do that. We also can do the tab here. That is really the answer. You can do either. It does really, they do similar things. The difference is the iManage app adds a whole bunch of functionality in where you do posts, right? So in other words, where you're IMing, you can do some really cool little stuff, around bringing the documents and bringing it a little more integrated together. That's what the app does.
Okay. There's a couple of sort of governance type questions I'm going to give to you together. I want to make sure we don't run out of time and not be able to. So there's one, which is how do you handle backing up channels, especially private channels? And then there's another that says, can we create a rule that only allows Teams to be used internally in the firm? We've had no, and that's worrisome to some. Well,
I think the answer is, and this is what we're trying to cover, is if you put a product like ours on top, one, we're going to make the settings to say you can't use this external. For each team, you can make it not use externally and work. And if you don't make someone an end user, so if the end user are not owners, they can't actually externally share. We're going to control that, right? So that is really the core thing that you need to keep your head in the game around, is that if you have something on top that's governing it, you can prevent that, allow external sharing from happening, because you will prevent anyone from adding an external user.
Within Teams itself, you can't prevent it. Is that right? Or
well, what it is the user can go into the channel, the owner of the team can go into the channel and click allow external collab.
Okay. So
right. You could do some things more at the Active Directory level to probably stop it some more, but Microsoft's not trying to. One of the things to keep in mind, and this is the key thing, there is a feature set that's supposed to drop in November called shared channels. Shared channels will totally redefine collaboration in the world, because what it'll do is it will create a shortcut to a team channel in your clients or your vendors extranet in their team and channel. So basically, you can work across organizations in a very seamless manner. That is transformational. That is supposed to hit in November. It raises a lot of governance issues, guys. Like, it raises external usage, creates lots of governance issues when someone is no longer working on a matter externally, removing their access, getting their stuff on. All along the ways, this stuff is really starting to wrap your head around. Your challenge, though, is also, once shared channels are turned on, if your clients use Teams, they're going to start inviting the partners to these shared channels. So this is, I think there's a lot of pressure on firms to do something now internally to make sure the data stays in the firm, or other clients are going to continue to kind of invite the lawyers in. And the challenge will be is, how do you get the data back? And how do you have your, the information governance stuff and records that law firms like to have around their service delivery in case of a malpractice suit or some other incident?
Yeah. On the there's a question from Tatiana Melnick regarding the client hub. So it says you have the internal and external, but then you have a client hub in ABCM and M&A matter. Is that client hub intended to be accessible to the client?
So the idea of the client hub was basically that you could post in standard information, or you could, the client hub concept was really, it's not a great channel in this example, but you could bring in other information that would be standard kind of client collaboration. I think we just added one. It really could belong in its own channel, which is a client level channel, client level team. So you can do and share all your best practices. And you could plot, I think you could plop in a link to an external SharePoint site. So you have another SharePoint site there that would give you, here's all that lovely laid out KM materials and other things could be there in the client hub.
Okay. Do you know what? So we, I think we're starting to get to time, but there's loads of people obviously still engaged. So I think there's so much stuff that I think we should talk about the planner a bit more in terms of, I think it might be worth, Sarah, could you do the demo of Microsoft Planner and Teams?
Yeah, certainly. So if I just jump into this channel here and jump into my planner tab. And what this is doing, as some have already identified, is really being used as a project management type of tool. So I can create tasks, I can create buckets, so essentially different different channels, different categories. I can also then start attaching documents, as you can see here, for example, and surface them within the image of the actual tab. I can assign, I can put labels as well. So for example, a trial label, I can even put checklists as well. So when things have been completed, I don't need to come in, I can just start clicking on these, as well as being able to add attachments, as we saw, as well as being able to add notes and comments as well. So this is a really, really good tool for especially surfacing what's happening with the actual matter itself or the project, and being able to organize and very, very intuitively being able to start making changes and updates as well. It all comes back to that collaboration. I'm showing it here as a board, but as you can see, I've got different options up here. I can show it as a list. I can show it as charts as well. So I can keep a tab on, for example, how many are late, how many are complete, how many are in process, etc. And I can even surface it in terms of a, if I see if I can, there we go, in terms of a calendar as well. So it's a really multifunctional tool.
Thank you. Keith, Jeremy's asking, is this the purest form of truly federated access, single sign-on, or rather, if anyone has a Microsoft 365 login, can they potentially access anyone's team's environment?
I think the answer is since most law firms are in a B2B environment, it basically means that anybody who uses Teams can continue to use Teams, right? So in other words, it's the ultimate federated collaboration that's going to exist. That is going to make, I think it makes a persistent change, because I think what it does is it allows organizations to start, in essence, disintermediate or outsource the work to different people. So in other words, you can say, well, it's now really easy to go hand due diligence to that alternative legal service provider. It's really easy to handle e-disclosure. It's really all, maybe it's 4 law firms working together, delivering a very large M&A. These issues become very, very, consistent and persistent when this shared channels feature really rolls out. I think it's really fundamentally game-changing technology.
I tried to just do a smiley face to O's Banana, who said, is Planner a Prosperoware product?
Oh, really, O's? Give me a break. It's Planner list. We are here providing the governance.
So do you want to say anything more? So I think Sarah, do you want to we're going to talk a little bit about delve a little bit more in terms of who participates. Obviously we've talked at a high level in terms of how the firm structures it, whether it's ad hoc, whether it's effectively their extranet. We've talked a little bit, I think, in the questions about Planner, but we're also going to talk about multi sort of design approach in terms of who participates. I think maybe Sarah, if you could just jump in and give us a bit of a demo in terms of perhaps some best practice on how people would set that up. Is that okay?
Yeah, certainly, of course. So I think we've already touched on the fact that, for example, the general channel really should be there as an announcement board, so for owners only to be able to make announcements and for people to comment. What you don't want is for it to be completely taken over with multiple people, because then essentially you can very easily lose the requirement for these others. So when somebody comes into a team, general is due to Teams, general is the first tab they come into. And if you're going to allow anybody, and Wendy is an owner here, so she's able to make posts, if you're going to allow anybody to make posts, they're going to start moving away from these channels here. So for example, if we go back to the example of Ryan, who doesn't have the ability to make a post, if he wants to post something about the matter, then he's going to have to come into matter, and then he can collaborate here. So it's ensuring that you have the right people collaborating in the right places, and that general doesn't just become really top heavy in terms of the activity. As we've already discussed, when it comes to the private channels, this is really going to be on a needs to know basis. So for example, Ryan is a partner, he has access to the partners only channel, but he doesn't need access to billing. That's just between myself in this case and Wendy. And the same comes in regards to clients as well. In this particular M&A matter, we sort of highlighted the client hub. This is just a use case whereby as a law firm, I've set up each of these channels. These are all essentially internal channels, but maybe as a law firm, I want to reduce the amount of the teams that I'm creating, and I have no problem letting the client in. So this particular channel here, this is public because this is where I have Terry Client, this is where I can start servicing information to him. And again, using those particular tools, especially with your clients, to start surfacing this information. Having worked in quite a few client collaboration softwares, or a number of them, Teams is actually a really, really great platform for interacting with your clients because it's so intuitive. There's no real training, if any, needed. They can come in, they can see the information. You can start using Planner. Other features such as lists. So in this example, as a client, I can come in and I can see who in my team, I've got all their details. I've got further information. As you can see, billing guidelines. This is using OneNote. So billing guide, also Wiki, travel policies, COVID updates. It's just really, really nice place. And the best feature of all for clients is that I now have direct access into the team at the law firm. I'm not having to rely on emails, and I can go back and forth. And again, all the great stuff we've just looked at, collaborating on documents, sharing information, sharing documents, setting up meetings, for example, it's all done here. I'm sure that for those who are using Teams, your end users are already doing this sort of stuff within their private chat. But now this allows us to have the ability to do that with our clients as well. And that will set you apart potentially from your peers in that respect.
Okay, I'll answer Oz's question. Does Prosperoware offer templates for practice-specific planners like TR tried to do? We've created some starting points. My assumption is that we try to create some starting points. We'll keep adding to the starting points. But to me, the lawyers need to. I assume most of the law firms that are on here are mostly ready to do things. So, they can kind of define what processes they want. We're happy to happy to keep making new starters because that's where we think our value is, not necessarily trying to define out of the box. We don't have a set of we don't have, TR has a set of people who are creating, in practical law, lots of different processes. That's not our business. Our business is creating technology. Where we think we come in is really providing the tools to do all the templating and provide you some place to start the conversation. Right? The lawyers need to take it from there as to what they want to do. Full employment for knowledge management professionals.
How many firms, Keith, do you see that are using Teams to its full, that you've gone, wow, that are using it for, because obviously the idea eventually is that everyone will be living in one place, right? The clients will be in your space, you'll be able to collaborate. And I mean, the vision is, and actually within the corporate world, as we know, they're much further ahead, but within the legal sector, within the law firms, how many are there yet, would you say, or is it none?
I think people are just getting there, right? People are, that is the core issue, guy. Everybody's just getting there. There are a bunch of leaders ahead of the pack, right? Who are really a little farther ahead. But the reality is that it's most firms are really, we went from the crisis to the reality to we need teams deployed for meetings, but now firms are really going, what does it mean and how do I think about it differently? Because now Microsoft has matured. Literally, if you realize how fast Microsoft innovates in real time, it's our challenge too to innovate in real time to keep up with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's really critical.
Last couple of questions. So Sophie Thompson, thank you. Do you think matter management will be the main use case for teams in law firms? What about connect and learn?
This involves, I think, connect and learn and practice. I think that's just one more piece. I think in the end, Teams is your user's desktop, right? You're instead of opening Outlook and Outlook being the primary place where people live all day, I think Teams becomes the place. I think Viva, with bringing in the training and the knowledge is a great thing, which is just most of Viva is bringing in SharePoint. There's lots of education that Viva is bringing in. There's lots of different things that people are doing along the way that really means that this is going to be the place to live. The difference between this and Outlook and why Outlook kind of just fell over is Teams was designed from the beginning to be something that accepts multiple applications as a collaborative platform. Right, that's what makes it so critical. Also, I have to tell you, to get a Teams app in the Microsoft Store is not easy. So there's a lot of testing and a lot of things that needs to go on to also make sure that it's scalable.
So last question, just quick. Anne Williams, thank you. How would you suggest users manage the notifications that appear when items are posted? I can see things becoming overwhelming with notifications coming in from all sides, especially if you're part of different teams, and distracting people from getting their work done.
No kidding. The users, that's a user setting. The users really can control on every matter on every team, every channel, what they want as the rules. I can tell you as a very long-term user of Teams, yeah, you got to do that. Otherwise, the noise can be deafening, right? It's a big challenge, but it really is just like managing WhatsApp or Signal or texting. You really need to have, you need to put all those controls in yourself to decide what is it that you want. It's kind of like turning on the ping on email. Nobody has that turned on anymore.
Yeah, true. Okay, look, I think before we've gone to an hour. We didn't plan to. We were planning to, we thought maybe half an hour, 3/4, but it just shows, obviously, there's so many questions. We can do this again. We've got actually another webinar plan. So why don't you contact us? You've got my email, it's everywhere, or contact one of our team, Emma Griffiths, and let us know what topics you want to be talked about in the next webinar, because we're trying to make this as useful and as targeted as possible. So send us your thoughts, send us any feedback, and it's great to have everyone here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Sarah.
Bye-bye.
Listening in.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.